So this is going to be a little bit different than the typical global conference panel in the sense that we have 6 incredibly talented and expert people up on stage, but we also have a talented group in the audience that is experiencing aging at different levels, and so all of you are considered not only subject to this panel, but who knows, I may call on you if you don't volunteer. How many people came to the earlier session that we did on aging? Anyone here? A couple. So what we don't want to do in this is to go back through all the data about how the United States is aging, 78 million boomers, 10,000 a day turning 65. Japan, the oldest country in the world, aging, rippling through Europe. We all know that we're experiencing a dramatic demographic shift. And so what I think we should do is take it on faith that this is something that we have to address. When I talk to people about aging, I say to them that the most important event, the most important shift occurring in the physical world is climate change. The most important shift occurring in the human world is aging, and we're not dealing with it. And we better start dealing with it whether we're in business or policy, or frankly, for ourselves and our families and our kids, not just for us. So I want to welcome, first of all, Barry Rand, CEO of AARP, terrific. Frida Lewis Hall, my good pal, who's the Chief Medical Officer of Pfizer. Steve Knapp, who's the President of George Washington University. Mark Friedman, who's the CEO and founder of Encore.org. I sit on Mark's board. Hasi Cohen, who is the Dean of the USC Davis School of Gerontology, and Henry Cisneros, who you probably know. He can't keep a job. He was mayor of San Antonio. He was Secretary of Housing and Urban Development for the United States, and has done so many other things in his life, and we're thrilled to have Henry with us. So what I'm going to do is I think just maybe start off with a question or two for this group, and while I'm doing that, my good pal Bob Whelan is, I see, scribbling notes about the question he's going to ask. All of you can think about the questions that you would like to ask this audience. So I think our fundamental topic, I would say, is 2 things. One, we have an extraordinarily talented group of people who are being underutilized in society, and utilizing them appropriately is not just good for them. There are lots of health indications that suggest that it's good for them, but it would also be extraordinarily good for our country and for the world. And this is, of course, an opportunity for some American leadership. 2, it's not happening, or at least it's not happening fast enough. And so the question is, what are the impediments? What can we do to address some of those challenges? Hi, Mike Morseberger. How are you? So maybe what I'll do is, Mark, start with, tell us your story about the sports team. I mean, so some people seem to get it.
Yeah, I was struck earlier this year as an inveterate sports fan by an article in USA Today. No, actually it was the Wall Street Journal on the back of the marketplace section, which tried to explain the unanticipated success of the Arizona Cardinals football team. And it turns out that the secret is that they hired old coaches. And it wasn't just that people had experience at this juncture, but there was essentially a kind of talent arbitrage opportunity. There were all these coaches who'd been discarded by other NFL teams primarily because they were seen as, kind of past the bye-bye date. And the Cardinals accumulated a whole coaching staff of people between 60 and 80, and in one magical year inverted their record. And I think that we're going to see more of savvy employers who realize that there's a group, as you were saying, that's being undervalued tremendously and and want to keep contributing and are available for new roles, and that those organizations are going to do better as a result of it.
So just to pop around, Henry, we know, Barry and his colleagues at AARP tell us that certainly in the boomer generation, people really aren't interested in moving to a place in the desert with a rec center and a shuffleboard court and a 9-hole golf course. They're interested in staying in their cities and remaining engaged. and having opportunities to continue to interact. So what's the opportunity, I would say, for cities in retaining that talent?
I think that they are interested in staying in cities, but more importantly, may have no choice. Many people are going to be left behind in neighborhoods where they have homes and their income is limited. So the reality is that many aging Americans will live in cities, and cities can do a much better job of making life better for people to age. Milken did a great job. You led the way in doing this index of best cities to age. It's important work, and I gather you're continuing to tweak that, and we'll do another edition of it. But cities ought to be places, as the chapter in the book suggests that you asked me to prepare, ought to be places for all ages. And that means that, I mean, that's a realistic proposition, because cities unaddressed, unchanged, unmodified, are not always friendly places. Barriers, physical barriers, security issues, difficulty in accessing transportation systems to get to doctors and pharmacies, issues of finances, everything from utility costs to taxes, and the difficulty of living in costly places. So we have a lot of work to do as a society. I know of no city in the country today that has worked to make itself age-friendly. There are places that have done pieces of things. Some of them would surprise you, like New York City, working on zoning neighborhoods so that they can work at the business of making it more age-friendly, and places like Chattanooga that are putting in place parks with an emphasis on aging, and places like Cincinnati that have put in place some policing programs that deal with aging. But nobody has said, we're going to be a city that has thought through how pre-K children to 80-year-olds can live and enhance their lives. And the key and final point I would make was made in the last panel, is that it ought to be about more than just mitigating the decline. This ought to be more about sort of making life tolerable for persons of age. We can actually, with the physical environment and the support systems, enhance life and stretch out the quality of life.
So, Steve Knapp, about a year ago, I think I talked to a group of university leaders, and I challenged them. And I said, in addition to being talented scholars, you're also good business people, because you wouldn't be running these very complex institutions if you weren't. And I said, in what other business would somebody have 24/7 investment in physical plant, technology infrastructure, human capital, et cetera, and then say, here's this massive customer opportunity out there, and it's growing, it's extending as a result of longevity, but I'm really going to principally focus on a small cohort between 17, 18 years old and maybe 27, 20, 28. How do you see universities taking advantage of this fabulous new opportunity for people who want to continue to learn?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm very interested in everything that Henry has to say, because in addition to being university president, I'm co-chairing a mayoral task force that is aimed at making the District of Columbia an age-friendly city. And I think there is a pretty profound commitment across the District of Columbia in making sure that every age group will be able to flourish there. And there's an analogy between that and making a university an age-friendly university, but I have to tell you, the university has not been very successful at this. And if you want evidence of that, just if you look at the demographics, the percentage of older adults attending college and universities has actually gone down since between 1998 and 2007, when the latest study that I saw actually declined from 18.1% to 16.5% of the student population, which is paradoxical, because you would think that this would be a time when, as our demographics are shifting, you'd see more older adults wanting to go back and get college education. What that tells you is that we're not being very successful in either reaching out or accommodating the interests and the needs, and frankly, some of the special interests on the part of older adults who come to their college or university experience with a totally different set of expectations. First of all, they're obviously more experienced, but they're also more disciplined. They have a stronger sense of purpose. They're not still trying to figure out what they're interested in. They usually come back with that sense of purpose already well developed. We don't necessarily make it all that easy for them. I think that some of what we're doing with technology now will actually expand those opportunities. I think that hybrid instruction in particular, which makes it combines the use of classroom instruction with online instruction, will make it easier, but we haven't been very strategic in doing this. And my chapter, contributing to the same book, was really focused on some of the things we need to think about in order to make universities better environments for students who don't necessarily want to come into a classroom where they feel isolated from peer groups that are decades younger than they are, but also aren't necessarily patient with being lectured to by scholars who don't necessarily appreciate or fully take into account their life experience, or in fact the disciplined approach to work that they've developed over the course of a lifetime. So I actually think there's a tremendous opportunity, but we're not fully realizing it.
So, Frida, you have this kind of very interesting dual role, because in addition to your big job at Pfizer, you also are on CBS talking about, in a sense, population health and individual health on a much more, let's call it holistic basis. So, I'm sure you probably like to talk about how it's very important that people take their meds and engage in a series of disciplines, which are obviously important for good health. But I want to talk about your CBS job,
okay,
if I can. So what kind of, coming from your scientific background, what do you see as the health opportunities that can enable people to continue and to realize not only the upside of aging, but the potential for continued work, engagement, and frankly, self-esteem and a sense of health, a sense of wellness?
So I love the CBS opportunity, so thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. I think that there are some really important things. One of them is to translate the information that we have so that people can use the tools that we have today in order to spare their health, to prevent illness. And I think I said earlier, we say, our lives are longer, we're living longer. And I push back sometimes and say we're not actually living longer, we're taking longer to die. Because the end of our lives tend to be filled with infirmity and disability. So being able to talk to people and translate what some of the tools are, information, knowledge, what are you supposed to do for you to improve the likelihood of living not just a longer life, but a healthier life, and to stay above the disability threshold. And so we spend time talking about, what would it take? What are some of the habits that you have that you should stop, and what are some of the ones that you should start? How do you make that digestible and manageable? And how do you also help people move from what they know they should do to what they actually do? And so we spend a lot of time providing education in snippets based on evidence that we have that suggests to people what they can do to live longer and healthier lives.
So Hasi, I know you're very focused on the notion of providing personal empowerment for older people through digital tools and various other mechanisms. So what do you see as the most exciting potential opportunity that will occur, let's say, in the next 5 years?
So, I think that what Frida says is absolutely true. The problem is, how do you motivate people to accept this one-size-fits-all advice? Everybody should go on a certain diet, do a lot of exercise, do yoga, play on luminosity when they're in the bathroom. When we each have our own issues that we need to deal with that are actually within our ability today to figure out what specific conditions, diseases, and ailments each one of us is very likely to get. And then we can focus our prevention efforts on the areas that really matter to those particular individuals, and other approaches for those things that matter to other individuals. And through personal genomics that is incredibly inexpensive, you can get your annotated genomic data analyzed for $99 today. And through digital technologies, all the apps that measure how many steps you take and connect it to what your personal goals are, combining these two technological revolutions with a focused, individualized prevention approach, preservation of wellness, this is something that's already being capitalized on. And in the next 5 years, it's going to dominate how healthy people plan their lives so they can avoid being sick.
So let's hypothesize for a second, and Barry, I'm coming to you. So let's assume that with Frida's counsel and with Hasi's, we've now improved health for older people. Henry has now helped us create cities that are walkable, that reduce the risk of falls, that have good transportation systems, et cetera. Mark has given them all a lecture on the importance of purpose, and Steve Knapp has given them enhanced education. So here's my question for you, and now I'm going to get hard. So I don't want to talk about policy for a second. I want to talk about culture. So how do we change for our society and ourselves a sense of decline in age? How do we deal with and I guess, Barry, I'm asking you this question because you probably directly and indirectly affect more aging lives than any guy in the world. So how do we create a different feeling about older people? I make jokes about the metaphor of my hair loss and my wrinkles and all the rest. The truth of the matter is that there is a view about decline relating to older people. What's your sense about what we can and should do about that?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that many older people believe that their possibilities are reduced the older that they get. And that's built around what they would call evidence. Many of the initiatives that are thought to be innovative, where the administration is doing things to help entrepreneurs, but they're all very young entrepreneurs. And we have been able to say, people are still innovative. People still have great ideas.
Even though the data shows that most entrepreneurs are actually middle-aged to older, right? So that's what the stats are.
Well, and I think that's correct. But the stats say that the middle age are the ones that are more successful than many of the young ones, sans Apple and sans the big ones that we all know about. But the data would say that they are very competitive. But the question beyond that really is, where are the opportunities? And are there investments in only young, or are there investments and opportunities for someone who is older? So the real issue is always about equity to a point where those seniors have an opportunity to do something. It is easy to criticize the productivity or criticize the innovation of someone who doesn't have an opportunity to prove it. And so the question is, people want opportunity, whether or not they're young or they're old. And do we have equity in the opportunity? So part of what ARP does is to make sure that we are in forums where we are trying to make equity for seniors. They still have a life to live, and they still are looking for the questions about, what do I do? Now, their assumption is that they have security with Social Security, and so they can now do things that they've always dreamt about doing. Their assumption is they have security with health care. And now they understand that however many lives they're going to live, they will do it with those two platforms. What they're asking for, though, beyond that is, I need to figure out and reimagine who I am and what I'm doing in the future. What makes me tick? What makes me reach out on something that I want to do, and how do I get help to reimagine my life? Because the life I've been living is now come to a standstill. But I believe I can reach out and I can do things. How do I do that? Who do I think I am? What do I have to, what other skills do I have to develop? They are all willing to develop new skills because they believe that age is not a determinant of the value that you bring.
Right, I agree with that. I'm interested in the demography of the audience. How many baby boomers do we have in the audience? Okay, overwhelming. I'm just going to ask the boomers a question. Everyone else hold hands. Of the boomers, how many of you want to retire? Traditional retirement. You want to buy a house someplace, get a boat, play golf, hang out with the grandkids.
What's wrong?
Nothing wrong. I'm
Not
not being critical. Not being critical. I'm literally just asking the question.
You have the wrong sample in America at this conference.
I understand. But I'm interested in how many of you see yourselves continuing your current job. Let's say beyond 65.
Me.
Quite a few. How many see yourselves potentially taking on a new job, an encore career, or something very different? Okay, so maybe about half and half. Barry Rand is one. So,
A key word.
Mark Friedman, I have a question for you. Is retirement a good thing?
You know, I think when retirement was originally devised, it was supposed to be a brief hiatus at, the end of one's useful life, a well-deserved rest. It was never designed to be a balloon payment of leisure as long as midlife in duration, which is as we've extended lives. You've probably all seen there's a very large insurance company that's associated with a rock that's been running advertising campaigns. You probably all walk by the one at LAX, and it says, the first person to live to 150 has already been born, and then the tagline is, let's all prepare for a longer retirement. So do we prepare for an 85-year retirement? So I think you can have too much of a good thing, and I think people should have retirements, but how many people can afford a 30-year retirement psychically, economically? How can a society afford to have a quarter to half of their population in that state? Japan, Korea, Germany, 40 to 50% of the country is going to be over 60.
Henry.
Paul, I was just going to say, picking up on the point, the sessions today have been very useful, I think, and they've really, framed some issues and made us all think. But one of the thoughts that occurs to me is that we have a session entitled The Upside of Aging. You have a book entitled The Upside of Aging, but under the present model, the upsides are few. I mean, the upsides are few, and the downsides are many. We live in a model that is youth-oriented, where appearance and glamour and so forth count. We live in a model where people have linear careers, and they end at a point in time, and then you have a lot of years after that. That causes financial inadequacy. There are inevitable health challenges, normal ailments and frailties that sort of add up over time. Little less energy to expend, and then people's priorities and purposes change. But we try to take all of that and apply it in the wrong model. What it seems to me the group has been saying today is that while we have infancy, childhood, adolescence, teenage years, young adult years, middle-age years, and then retirement years, that needs to be a finer gradient. There's a long period of time there where we can have gray years, but they're not the end of life years. The end of life years can be way at the end, and the society has to readjust itself and change the fundamental model, financial, governmental, policy, built environment, and attitudinal or culture as to what is done with that span of time. And that's as big a challenge as you said at the outset when you said there are two things that grab your attention as priorities in the world: climate change and aging. And I think it is that significant that it requires some societal changes that are pretty fundamental.
I do too. Before I want to, one more very fast question, lightning round for everyone.
Can I just add on to
Go ahead, Frida.
Because I want to make sure that we don't kind of get lost in maybe a fantasy about retirement. A lot of people don't get to choose to end their careers and play golf or boat or do other things. Many people are coming home from very long, hard years at work to take care of parents or grandchildren, or are continuing to work not at something that's purpose-driven unless the purpose is paying your rent. So, I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the so very many people in our aging population that are not making the choice in the way that we've described it. These choices are in many cases being made for them by the circumstances of their lives, and they still need all the things that we've been talking about and maybe more.
And they also need the opportunity to address those
Exactly.
issues, and to the extent that we don't change culture,
Exactly.
we have an impediment that may be impossible to overcome. So I literally just want one or two words from each of you on what you see as the opportunity for society. Let's not talk about individuals for this purpose. The benefits for society in trying to retain and continue to engage older people. What are the benefits, Henry?
I think an interconnection with the very young. It's a place where seniors can make a difference. They're temperamentally attuned to it, and we need it in the society.
Hasi?
I think that a really important thing is a paradigm shift regarding health from disease management for the elderly to wellness preservation. And when people need to think not good about what pills they take, about what they do to keep healthy.
Prevention. Mark?
I'm going to channel Henry and say to bring back this idea of generativity in society. So as people get older, they get closer to their own mortality. It's just natural to want to invest in young people, and that's also the direction the country always had too. The next generation would have it better than the last, and I think that this population is like our generative heartland if we help make it possible for people to play those roles.
Steve?
I like the first three. I'll just add something from a slightly different angle. I think it's a paradigm shift we need in the conception of careers. And that's already happening in younger generations, interestingly enough. I mean, the students that I see every day are not interested in getting on a career track and having a linear career that goes through 3 or 4 stages and then comes to a halt and then decide what to do next. They're constantly shifting among different conceptions of their lives. They don't have the same sense of the division between leisure and work that others have. They're less attuned to moving through an organization in the way that we have. And I think we've kind of boxed ourselves in a little bit with the way in which we conceive careers. And I think that's a loss of productivity. If we can figure out how to shift that and open up other possibilities, and I do think, and I'm very interested in seeing ways in which older adults can contribute, even to institutions like mine, outside of the normal tenure track progression through the faculty, because I think they have a tremendous amount of wisdom, experience, knowledge, and energy and innovativeness that they can contribute to the institution, but we don't have any pathways for them to do it because we're so locked into a certain kind of model of progression.
Yeah. So we may have some organic resolution of this with the millennials. Frida?
Well, and also I want to do it here to Mark's point, which is there are so many issues to be solved, so very many issues to be solved, and this is a group of people that have experiences, and I think the passion, to your point, Mark, to give back. And I believe that unless we can find a way to provide a platform and a foundation, a way that they can give back, we'll be missing out on so much.
Barry?
I think like most people, they're looking for purpose. And if they see in retirement, sitting in a room, not doing much, they don't want that. They still want to have purpose, a meaningful future. For whatever amount of years they have left, they want meaning, they want purpose, and they want help to be able to get that done.
So I now want to turn to you, assuming you'll let me turn to you. And we like ideas. By the way, there are no answers to these very, very big questions, but they're really big questions that we have to address. So who's got either a question for the panel or a great idea? I see Brooke. Let me call on you first. We need a mic. Skip, does somebody have a mic? Somebody's supposed to have a mic. Here comes Jeff Schatz with a mic. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to shift over here.
Hi there.
Hi.
So I'm a baby boomer, and what I want to, and I talk to a lot of younger people, and I want to know what do we have to apologize for? Because I think we do. I mean, the world that we're talking about is of our creation, right? And I meet a lot of my peers who have complaints, but they never take responsibility for the fact that and a good example would be people who complain about their children. At the end, I say, so in essence, you're saying they're a product of bad parenting, right? So that's my question. What do we, baby boomers, what are we able to take responsibility for? Because many of the people I talk to are half our age who don't want to talk to us, say, you never apologize. You just want to know how you can have a better retirement and how we could pay for it, for example.
So,
why we should hire you.
I'm not 100. Maybe somebody else is clear. I'm not 100% sure I understand the question. So are you talking about the intergenerational question?
I'm talking about us. I'm 61 now. Us, our age. What can we take responsibility for that these problems, what's our fault? What could be our fault?
I don't know.
other
I
than
don't know.
society's?
Anybody want to take that? Henry, you look like you're going to take it.
I would say the baby boomers have nothing to apologize for because individuals ride the crest of societal change. It's massive and it flows in a current and you're swept up in it as the baby boomers have been. So it's hard to say accepting responsibility for big changes, but there's also the opportunity individually to try to make things right on your watch. And that's the conversation that we had a moment ago. Barry's point about purpose, if a person is 61 years old and has another 25 years to 86 of functioning, useful life, there's things that can be made right in the society. And again, I go back to my earlier point. We have a very fast society. It's changed very rapidly at the younger ages. Children are bombarded with everything from dysfunctional families to schools that aren't working for them. And there's a place we can slow down a notch as a generation and still help people on a one-on-one basis. That would be my answer.
Andrew, I'm calling on you.
Oh,
Microphone. We got to have Jeff. You got to run faster here. We're gonna have a lot of questions.
I'd be
Jeff's a baby boomer. We're trying to get him to move quickly. Okay, Andrew.
I'd be very interested in the public policy priorities that you would all each like to see happen. Changes.
Just very quick. So let's just go kind of again lightning round. Start with Henry and come down to Barry.
I
One
think
change.
not a change, but sustain the programs that are needed to maintain financial stability for aging Americans. Don't let those be eroded in any way and sustain the level of support.
Hasi.
Ensuring that privacy needs are not going to stand in the way of providing 21st century quality healthcare by maintaining the guarantee that everybody will have access to health insurance and wellness preservation.
Mark.
A second chance to move up the ladder at social mobility, and my single favorite policy innovations there is something called Troops to Teachers, which helps retired military sergeants go from, oftentimes people who couldn't afford to go to college the first time around, get a second bite at the apple and become teachers mostly in inner city schools. And it's a brilliant example of people using their previous skills in new ways that meet another need and also move up the ladder.
Steve.
So we have a powerful example of innovation in the GI Bill, which has been revived in the current return of 1 million veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq. We're taking a very close look at that and actually working very closely with veterans and trying to open pathways for new careers. I think there's an analogy between that and the way we could think about how we can mobilize people in what are called encore careers, because it's all about the same kind of thing. We're bringing students who are older, more experienced because they've had military experience into a context in which most of their peers are 18 to 22-year-olds who haven't had anything like that life experience. How do you bridge that gap? There are ways of doing that strategically. I think it's going to work for veterans if we can concentrate on it and be strategic in our approach. And I see no reason why we couldn't do that for other populations up and down the spectrum. The problem is what we lack is a strategic way of thinking across these different age domains as we do across so many other domains.
Frida.
A Man on the Moon's equivalent commitment to addressing Alzheimer's, which is, to my mind, the game changer in healthy aging for us globally.
Response to Sputnik. Barry.
I'm going to ask you to repeat the question. I got so caught up in the answer.
So, well, I think the question was. I don't want to make you cry. I think the question was just kind of one policy change, one big policy or practice change that you'd see. Just one.
I think in America, if you want to make America better, then I think all of the age segments have got to feel that they have purpose and that they're being treated in a way that they are able to live their lives as best as they can. So just think about this, it's been said before, but as you get older and you really don't have health care, what are the possibilities of you thinking that you can live a better life? Same thing with financial security. What's the possibilities of it? But most important, everybody sitting here is going to reach that same stage. And if you reach that same stage and you don't have health care and you don't have financial security, think about that. Because we have to think up and down the ladder. Those that are older, those that are younger, and ourselves. So I just want you to think about those things that says, what do we need, not just for specific people, but what do we need to be a great society that cares for other people, that does things for other people, that reaches up and reaches back. That's what I think we have to do.
Culture shift. Bob. Speaker. Here.
As this is a global conference, and we are not the only country going through these dynamic demographic changes, are there policies, practices, attitudes that we could import that may not solve the problem, but could add to the solution?
Paul, just a quick word, that doesn't solve the problem of aging, but it does address the question of aging and its impact on national strength and power. And what these other countries lack, they are aging, they're not replacing, and they have no immigrant strategies. The difference for the United States is that we are an immigrant-friendly country, and that will be the source of our population growth and the workforce that's able to sustain our aging population. So smart immigration policies, as unrelated as that seems to a discussion on aging, is the counterbalance to an aging population. And if we don't get that right, then we go the same road as Japan, Portugal, Spain, Russia, etc. So that's one policy framework that is very, very important.
We will be the first country in the world both to experience radical aging and a majority-minority nation. Hasi.
We are going to be a laboratory as a superpower for what it is to age in a very large country. And China is going to look at us to see what kind of solutions we're going to come up with. I don't think we have any major policy brilliant ideas to import yet, but I think we're going to do the experiments that countries like China will be implementing in 10 or 15 years.
But I would say, and I just want to comment on Frida's point about Alzheimer's. Part of the challenge in Alzheimer's, as we know, is way underinvested in medical research. So a question that I guess I would pose is, if we assume that older people are relatively unimportant, then why invest in research on an older person's disease? The same, by the way, argument that could have been made about sickle cell in African Americans, or breast cancer in women, or frankly HIV and AIDS and gay men before the Magic Johnson announcement kind of democratized the challenge. So is it possible, Frida? I'll come to you. That the key to, for example, addressing your concern is really this question of changing culture, hearts and minds about the value of older people?
I'm not sure I necessarily believe that the advancements or the lack of advancements in Alzheimer's are really related to discounting the value of an aging population. It's been a very vexing scientific platform. We don't understand as much as we need to understand about the brain, how thoughts and memories are laid down and what goes wrong when they're, in Alzheimer's and other cognitive dysfunction. But I think that recently the combination of data and diagnostics and some groundbreaking work in genetics and genomics are really at an intersection now where we're about to explode our ability to understand Alzheimer's as a disease and then to begin to intervene either behaviorally early to either reduce the decline in Alzheimer's or to actually come up with therapeutic interventions that would either slow the progression or change the course, or vaccines even are being developed that would perhaps prevent the development of Alzheimer's. So I think we now have the will and are beginning to get our way. So I think we are on our way.
Let me go to this side, and then I'll come back. Sir, you there, then you there, then I'm coming over here.
The views of utopia are great, but some things are being ignored, I think. 2% of Americans retire financially independent, and that's basically no one. I'm not sure what the numbers are on illiteracy as far as getting all these programs out to people, but I think it's at least 10% of Americans are functionally illiterate in English. Having the elderly help younger kids with schoolwork would be great if we could build a happy, cooperative community, but I don't think you're going to be having that happen when people are moving into gated communities. It's a long haul, and most people, the main thing is, don't have the money, which is why if you go to Taco Bell, there are 65-year-olds working, and it's not because they like working at Taco Bell, and that's a basic problem that needs to be addressed. How will we fix that?
Oh, pick me.
Objection, compound. Go ahead.
Well,
Frida.
in the earlier session, we did have an opportunity to talk about what I called practical purpose. So there are some very significant shortages in this country, lay health workers to provide care to people who are disabled and require in-home care, for example, teaching. There's a whole list of shortages, if you would, in our communities. If we had a structure that allowed repurposing and retraining and then rewarding people, not as volunteers to do these very important things, but as a part of this sorely needed workforce, then we may be able to solve some of this financial problem, as well as building and sustaining and advancing our cities. And then the trifecta, right, would be to also provide opportunities for people who say they want to have purpose, they want to contribute, et cetera. So I think that policies that allow that would be interesting opportunities.
Henry.
I just want to take issue with the idea that the ideas that are advanced here are utopian. They're not utopian, they are essential given what we're going into. You asked a question about why invest in Alzheimer's, because life is being extended, but Alzheimer's incidence is occurring at a fixed point. So the span of time that people live with it is lengthening, and the costs are immense to the society. So it's not a utopian play, it's an economic reality. The other things that we've talked about in terms of financial support, there's nothing utopian about trying to help people who, in my world, the elderly that I see, are undergoing amputations for diabetes. They are living with dementia and Alzheimer's. They are poor in isolated homes without anybody to attend to them. They have no transportation systems. They're isolated. They say their number one complaint is loneliness and isolation. So the answers are not in search of something utopian, they're in search of something humane that the society can address, because it is an absolute imperative.
And I would reinforce Frida's point at the base of the pyramid. So for relatively unskilled workers, there is a massive need. We need an army of healthcare workers, home healthcare workers, that frankly can offset some of the economic costs associated with you or me taking care of elderly parents, et cetera. At the top of the pyramid, there's an incredible opportunity, a longevity economy, where innovation, new products, new services, et cetera, can be developed. So, again, I think we have to see this as an opportunity. Sir, over here.
I wanted to comment on the first gentleman's comments next to me, or question. I think the baby boomers do owe something. We created this world and culture that we live in. We are leaving the next generation, unless we do something radically soon, with a lot of debt that's going to take a lot of time to pay off. We've created the cultural environment where we have emphasized the the superficial, the material, over the more spiritual, the sense of purpose. Spiritual, I don't mean necessarily religion, but just a sense of an inner being that's purposeful. Something interesting happens that has been recognized, I think, through the millennia, and then we sort of destroyed it, which is that when you're young, you have great physical and mental energy, which then declines progressively as we age. But what you lack is that sense of, you lack the experience and the spiritual energy that can increase over time and gets valued in its own right. So we have valued the beauty of youth, and the baby boomers are only now recognizing that doesn't last forever. But we devalued the inner beauty that happens and continues to grow within the elderly. And I think some of the ideas that I heard here are absolutely wonderful, and institutionalizing or trying to play a part in reversing values that we instilled. And that includes emphasizing the spiritual, but we are the ones, and I came out of industry, that created the advertising industry, and a lot of the things that are causing the physical infirmities that now exist are a result of the emphasis of superficiality that we created as a generation.
So I just want to let the panel.
Maybe I'll jump in.
Mark,
on this.
why don't you jump in?
Yeah. There was just a New York Times article, I think it was last week, that showed that 55 to 65-year-olds in the United States have ranked the highest in the world in terms of human capital, and young people rank close to the bottom in the developed world. And I think there's an imperative there, to whom much is given, much is expected. I think we can make something very powerful out of this gift of longevity and health that we've been given as boomers, and shape this period of life in a way that benefits society, improves the circumstances of young people, and actually gives them something to look forward to, since half the kids in the developed world born since 2000 are projected to see their 100th birthday. So they're all right on our heels. Can we, just like the women in the boomer generation did in the 60s and 70s, creating a new vision for the role of women in society, could we do the same for this period in life? Not just for ourselves, but for all those who are coming behind us.
A question. I'm Andy Hartsville with Sanofi. A question for Steve mainly, maybe it's something we can do. If we're going to make any policy changes in Washington, as you know, especially investing money, we're going to hit the barrier of how do you pay for it? And it seems to me, just take my mother, for example, one year she's in her 70s, she's volunteering, delivering Wheels on Meals, volunteering at the elementary school, going to lunch, buying things, generating economic activity. The next year she's locked up in an Alzheimer's unit 24 hours a day, generating nothing. Have we done the study, I've looked and haven't seen it, that really captures the full value of keeping people healthy, whether it's Alzheimer's or diabetes, but keeping them productive and healthy? It seems to me it's a huge economic benefit that CBO would score, but we have to have that data, and I haven't seen it, and maybe it's something we need to do sooner rather than later to capture that full, both the volunteering, but also the hard dollars, the taxes, the buying more presents for her grandkids than you can possibly justify.
Well, I mean, I can just comment on that. Mike Milken puts up a slide every time he does a session on public health, and he talks about the costs of obesity over roughly a 20-year or so period. Frida, you've seen this slide a lot, and he talks about roughly $1 trillion a year. That includes estimates on economic costs, productivity loss, absenteeism, presenteeism, et cetera. The numbers are not good enough. Yeah. Well, I absolutely agree. We tend when we talk about the costs of disease to talk about disease care, and a series of relatively simple additional measures, I don't think we fully load it. And I think, by the way, that's the post-partisan aspect of this. Whether one looks at this from the perspective of some kind of collective responsibility or from the perspective of cost savings and return on investment, the need to address this issue is compelling. Here, we'll go to you next.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I would like to talk about workforce development and that next iteration of what happens when someone breathes into the downturn economy, that people have lost jobs and unable to fulfill their path, that linear path. They've been asked to go to work at Taco Bell or as greeters at Walmart, and they're working very hard to find relatively low-paying jobs. Are there institutions, opportunities, education that's available that we know of today, similar to AmeriCorps for younger people, that we can infuse our economy with a second generation, a next iteration of workers?
Barry, you want to talk about Experience Corps for a second?
Yes, Experience Corps. What is Experience Corps? Let me first say that most people who think about AARP think of it as a seniors organization. Let me first tell you that it is for seniors and their families. So I'm going to give you an example of what we are doing on the family portion of it. I believe this gentleman over here talked about the morass of problems we have in many neighborhoods and whether or not what we are doing about it results in, for lack of a better word, people who are better prepared to be able to introduce more quality into our society. And so Experience Corps, we got interested in and brought it into the ARP family because of the following reason. We have a system by which the prison system goes about trying to judge the capacity that they need to build every year. And part of that is looking at the number of kids in neighborhoods of color that are reading by age or by the third or fourth grade. That is what helps determine the capacity. That is what helps also to understand how much of our human capital is going to waste. So Experience Corps is an organization that we brought in who uses people who want to volunteer to teach reading in the third and fourth grade. It is excellent for those people who want to give something to society. It's excellent for these communities when we say, how do we enrich these communities? How do we break the cycle of people who are not reading, not contributing, going to jail, coming out of jail, and repeating that cycle in the same neighborhoods? So we believe that this is one way for ARP to contribute. But the real issue is not how much we can do. The real issue is there are ways of making sure that we can make America better, community by community. So I think it's important for you to know that many of us are involved in trying to make America a better place, take the resources that we sorely need for the future and make sure that they are prepared. Now, having said that, we still believe that we're talking about America's families and whether or not they're connected specifically or we just live in the same community. Those neighborhoods need to have enrichment in any way possible. And so here's a pitch. If anybody wants to go and help kids to read, sign up.
See Barry after the session. I think probably our last question right here.
First, I want to thank you. It's been great. And I also wanted to share that I've read the advertisements from AARP on reaching out for families that are the caretakers, and it impacted me because we all had parents that passed, and it wasn't a pleasant period. So, and many of my siblings, and so I think we could probably use AARP more for advertising in terms of an outreach. It's not just a lobby for Social Security and for benefits, because then we look very self-centered and selfish. So I apologize for that side, but there's a better use of how AARP actually advertises. And things like this experience core would be phenomenal. I sat and listened to everybody twice. I went to the other panel too, maybe self-interest, but some of it is mostly about building the community, right? And I like the idea of a work-study program. So you're talking about going back to college. Who would invest in an older person to go back to college? But if it's a work study and they're working to pay, whatever they come out with, like, I don't know what I want to do next, right? So if you can have like some kind of a work study program, and that would be the policy change, and if you had it for the older generation, and then so you pay as you pay, right? Then maybe ARP can also join in and do the advertising for it.
Okay. We have a program in development. We're coming, I think, if I'm right, to just about to the end of our session. So here's my question for the panel. If we did this exact same discussion 5 years from now and 10 years from now, I want a sentence on each. What would we have accomplished? I want to focus on the positive. What would we have accomplished to change culture and practice around aging? And let's talk about it in America, because we're on this panel all Americans. Henry, start with you.
I think in the next 5 and 10 years, the baby boomers, who will by then be more and more among the over 65 population, will do what they've done at every other stage of their existence, which is innovate, create, come up with ideas, join, and we're going to see movements like the Village Network movement, which is now in 150 cities, engaging people, bartering services. We're going to see a whole lot of innovation at the local level, probably not in Washington, but at the local level that deals specifically with aging. That's what I think.
Asi?
I think that in 5 years we would have created a panel of technological tools to help us make decisions about our health. And I think that in 10 years, I predict that the majority of Americans will be actively involved in wellness preservation, which is something maybe many people in this audience are involved in, but something that would be across all economic and social groups. People will be thinking about their health in terms of prevention.
Good. Mark?
I think young people in their 30s, 20s, 40s will be already thinking about what they're going to be doing in this other chapter and making decisions in midlife. You know, why go to college for 7 years when you're 18, when it's hard to know at 18 what you're going to want to do at 58? That young people will be allocating their productivity and leisure in different ways in anticipation of this extra period in life.
Steve?
Putting together what Henry said, I mean, I think first of all, the District of Columbia will have, at the end of this year, a strategic plan for making the District of Columbia an age-friendly city that incorporates the village movement, which is already very active. So I think you're going to see that kind of transformation taking place all across the United States, because people do want to live, and they do want to age in place, as the saying goes, and they want to be successful in doing that. They want to support each other in that effort. But when it comes to just picking up on my particular business, which of course is education, it seems to me that there will be increasing demand. I think even though it's been slow building, I think there will be demand from older adults to take advantage of the resources which will become available to them, because the demographics are shifting. There are going to be fewer younger students coming into college and universities. I think college and universities will see that as a market opportunity for them. Right now they're filling that gap with international students. That'll probably continue, but there's no reason why they wouldn't take advantage of the talents and the interest of older Americans. So you're going to see, and what will happen is, as as we get the kind of thing Mark was talking about, where there's a more fluid sense on the part of younger generations of how they're going to define their lives and move in and out of career paths, I think that you'll see that probably evolving upwards as well, so that there'll be more opportunities for older Americans to intervene in ways that are not really available to them right now.
Terrific. Frida?
So I believe that the old adage will be well at play. I agree with Hassie 10 years from now that the baby boomers will have acknowledged that if they had taken better care of them, if they had known that they were going to live this long, they would have taken better care of themselves in their youth. And they will still have a lot of years to go. And so we'll see kind of a wellness surge. I also think that biomedical technology will have marched forward in an accelerated fashion, and that we'll have a new slew of diagnostics and data to help us in wellness, but we'll also have some very significant advancements when we fall ill.
And Barry?
I think one of the things that you will see is Henry will be very successful in creating more communities that are friendly to families and friendly to seniors. I believe that we will see more of those communities being built and being able to take care of many of the local problems that we have. So I want to congratulate you already.
Okay, good.
The second thing is I believe that we will end up taking resources out of our communities now that are having difficulties being solid resources to invest back into America. And you will see education reach all-time highs for these communities. You will see more people educated and coming back into society and being a positive.
Thank you. So we are out of time. I think at least a couple of us are going to head over and sign some books if anybody's interested in buying a book and reading more about their views. Please join me in thanking the terrific.
Good to be with you. Thank you.